When you were young, did your parents leave you with a babysitter? If you were lucky, you would stay up late and watch whatever TV show you wanted. If you were Sylvia Likens, you would have been much more unfortunate. Sylvia suffered a slow and painful death from the hands of her caregiver. Welcome to Local Cryptids. If you're into true crime, don't forget to stab that subscription button as well as slash that notification bell to be alerted every single time I post a new case. Sylvia Likens was born January 3rd, 1949. Her parents were Lester and Betty. Sylvia was a middle child between two sets of twins. The older twins were Daniel and Diana. The younger twins were Benny and Jenny. Jenny wore a steel brace on her leg because of a limp caused by polio. Lester and Betty's marriage was unstable. They traveled around Indiana during the summer to sell candy and pop at carnival stands. The family regularly had financial difficulties, so Daniel and Benny would travel with the parents for work and the girls would stay with the grandmother. Sylvia was liked in her hometown of Indianapolis. She would often run errands, do ironing, and babysit for neighbors and friends. And she would also give a large portion of her earnings to her mother to help the family's financial difficulties. Sylvia was described as friendly and confident. She had long wavy hair that went past her shoulders. Her friends called her Cookie, and they would later say she had a lot of potential in life. Sylvia was also very protective of Jenny. Jenny was much more timid and shy and quiet, and Sylvia would always go out of her way to make sure she was happy and well taken care of. Sylvia and Jenny became friends with two sisters from school named Paula and Stephanie Baniszewki. The girls would often spend time at their mother Gertrude's home. She would allow the girls to spend the night and was very kind to them. Gertrude Baniszewki was born September 19, 1928, and she was from Indianapolis. She was married at 16 years old to John Stephen Baniszewski. The couple had 4 children together and were together for about 10 years. John was abusive to her and had a violent temper. When they divorced, Gertrude married a man named Edward Guthrie for 3 months and then divorced him and remarried John. The couple had 2 more children and divorced for good in 1963. A few weeks after they were divorced, Gertrude would later start a relationship with a 22-year-old man named Dennis Lee Wright. Dennis and Gertrude had a baby together, and he immediately left after the baby was born and refused to pay child support. By 1965, Gertrude was living alone with her 7 children. At this point, she was 36 years old, she only weighed about 100 pounds, and she was a chain smoker and severely depressed due to the stress of her failing relationships. She did odd jobs to support her children and pay rent for her home, located at 3850 East New York Street, which was $55. On July 3rd, 1965, Betty was arrested for shoplifting. By this point, she had been taking care of Jenny and Sylvia because her and Lester had separated and she was struggling financially, so she got caught shoplifting some food. And Lester took this opportunity to fix his relationship with Betty, to try to work throughout the summer and get some money together so him and his family could get back together by the fall. So he asked Gertrude, who was already familiar with Sylvia and Jenny, if he could give her $20 a week to board his daughters. And Gertrude gladly accepted because she, of course, was doing very poorly financially, so this was a win-win situation for both families. Sylvia and Jenny moved in the following day on the 4th of July. The first few weeks of their stay was enjoyable for the girls. They attended church with the Baniszewski family and helped with household chores. After 2 weeks, Lester's payments to Gertrude began arriving a couple of days late. Gertrude was very angry and would beat the 2 girls with a wooden paddle and say, quote, "Well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing," end quote. Paula soon started in on the abuse as well. She told her mother that Sylvia and Jenny had eaten too much food at a church dinner, and Gertrude beat both of the girls 15 times on their backs with a wooden paddle. By the middle of August, the abuse was solely placed on Sylvia. Jenny later said that Sylvia told Gertrude that she would take her younger sister's beatings. Investigators of this case also believed that Gertrude was jealous of Sylvia because she was a beautiful young girl and had potential in life. Gertrude would not allow Sylvia to eat with the rest of the family. She would force Sylvia to eat old leftovers or out of the garbage, And she would also be very angry with Sylvia because she accused her of stealing some candy, which Sylvia did pay for. And she also accused Sylvia of being pregnant. And after this accusation, Gertrude kicked Sylvia in her genitals. Paula became pregnant by a much older married man whom she had a fling with. And it is believed by investigators that Gertrude was very angry with Paula, but she didn't take it out on her. She didn't feel that she could take that anger out on her daughter, so instead she took it out on Sylvia. The abuse became much more physical from there. Paula would knock Sylvia off chairs, and on one occasion, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy Gordon Lepper forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog overloaded with condiments, and it caused her to vomit, and was forced to eat what she regurgitated later. As a retaliation, Sylvia told the other kids at school that Paula and Stephanie were prostitutes. And Stephanie found out about this first because a boy solicited her as a joke, and she became very angry and came home and punched Sylvia in the face. But she quickly felt bad, and she cried after this happened because Sylvia was crying. Stephanie's boyfriend, 15-year-old Coy Randolph Hubbard, heard about the rumor. He attacked Sylvia by banging her head up against the wall and slapping her. Gertrude later used the paddle to beat her. The abuse continued for months. The other kids in the neighborhood, along with the Baniszewki kids, would torture Sylvia. Paula broke her wrist at one point from beating Sylvia in the face, as she was burned with cigarettes over 100 times. Gertrude would have Sylvia strip in front of the neighborhood boys and insert a Coke bottle into her genitalia. Gertrude would tell Sylvia that she wanted to humiliate her to, quote, prove to Jenny what kind of girl you are, end quote. Sylvia got caught stealing a gym uniform from school because Gertrude would no longer buy her any clothing. And because of this, she was not allowed to go to school anymore, and Gertrude beat her with a belt. Jenny was fearful of letting anyone know about the abuse going on in the home. If it was even alluded to by Jenny, Gertrude would give her a hit with one of the paddles or with a belt, and Gertrude told her if she told anybody what was going on, that she would receive the same treatment as Sylvia. Lester and Betty visited their daughters a few times throughout July and August. Neither girl told their parents of the abuse. Jenny and Sylvia also saw their older sister Deanna, who they did confide in about the abuse, but she believed they were exaggerating. Gertrude's neighbors, Raymond and Phyllis Vermillion, also witnessed several acts of Sylvia's abuse. Even at a cookout at their home, Paula was abusing Sylvia, and they even stated later that Sylvia was in a zombie-like state. But they never reported any of these instances to the police. The abuse only escalated from there. Gertrude became angry with Sylvia because she became incontinent because of the abuse and was denied use of the bathroom. Because Sylvia would wet herself, Gertrude put her in the basement where she was tied up, rarely fed, and mostly naked. Children from the neighborhood would be charged 5 cents to watch Sylvia's humiliation and abuse. Gertrude would throw hot water on her, she would beat her, and overall just humiliate Sylvia in front of all of these children. After weeks of torment, Gertrude allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs if she did not wet the bed. Sylvia asked Jenny to give her a glass of water secretly, and when the morning rolled around, she had urinated on the bed. Gertrude again forced Sylvia to strip and insert a Coke bottle into her genitals, and forced her into the basement yet again. Gertrude later ordered Sylvia back up to the kitchen and branded her along with a 14-year-old boy named Richard Dean Hobbs. He branded her with the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," on her abdomen. Richard would abuse Sylvia whenever Gertrude asked him to. Investigators believe the two carried on a sexual relationship during this time. Richard and Shirley Baniszewski would then take Sylvia back downstairs, where they tried to brand her again with the letter S under her left breast, but they ended up with a letter 3 instead. Gertrude, assumingly trying to cover up her tracks, forced Sylvia to write a letter to her parents. And in this letter, she stated that she was abducted by a group of boys after she agreed to partake in sexual acts with them. They beat her, tortured her, and assaulted her, and then she came back to Gertrude's home. Gertrude was forming a plan for her son John Jr. and Jenny to take Sylvia to the woods blindfolded and leave her there. Sylvia attempted to run away on October 25th after she heard Gertrude talking about this. She tried to run through the front door, but due to her injuries, she could not make it through and Gertrude caught her. Sylvia was beaten until unconscious and taken to the basement. Sylvia would later tell her sister, quote, "Jenny, I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die. I can tell it," end quote. On October 26th, Sylvia was barely able to speak or move her limbs. Gertrude tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but became very angry when Sylvia couldn't hold the glass of milk up to her lips. Sylvia was able to point at her tormentors and say, "You're Ricky and you're Gertie," and this infuriated Gertrude, and so she put Sylvia back in the basement. At 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs arrived at the Baniszewski home and saw Stephanie crying next to Sylvia. Gertrude ordered both of them to wash Sylvia's body, and in the only kindness Sylvia received in months, the two gave her a warm bath and laid her on the mattress upstairs. Sylvia would mutter her final wish that her daddy was here and that Stephanie would take her home. Stephanie then realized that Sylvia was no longer breathing and she tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation while Gertrude was screaming that she was faking her death in the background. Sylvia finally succumbed to her death when she was only 16 years old. Gertrude was still being abusive and hitting Sylvia's body with a book, shouting, "Faker." She quickly realized that Sylvia had died and told Richard to call the police from a payphone nearby the home. Police arrived at the home at 6:30 p.m. Gertrude gave them the letter that she forced Sylvia to write, and she told them that Sylvia had ran away, that she had been beaten up by all these boys, and for the last couple days, Gertrude said that she has been taking care of her, trying to heal her wounds with rubbing alcohol. Paula told Jenny in front of the police, quote, "If you want to live with us, Jenny, we'll treat you like our own sister," end quote. Gertrude told the children what to say when police arrived. They all complied except for Jenny. She whispered to an officer, quote, "You get me out of here and I'll tell you everything," end quote. Sylvia's autopsy stated that her body was extremely emaciated at the time of her death and that she had over 150 injuries across her body. The official cause of death was due to subdural hematoma due to a severe blow to her right temple. Sylvia's family held a funeral service for her on October 29th as she was buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis. Jenny's statement to the police prompted arrests for Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, John Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs. At first, Gertrude denied any involvement with Sylvia's death. She said that her medication made her very tired and she wasn't really aware of what was going on in her home. But on October 27th, she did admit to knowing that her children were abusing Sylvia. Paula and John Jr. admitted physical violence against Sylvia, and they also told police everything their mother did, including burning Sylvia with a cigarette 100 times. Several children in the neighborhood were also arrested for causing injury to a person, but they were released until their parents' custody as they were awaiting trial. The trial began on April 18, 1966 for Gertrude, Paula, John Jr., Richard Hobbs, and Coy Hubbard. Gertrude pled guilty by reason of insanity, and the others claimed to be pressured into participating in Sylvia's torture by Gertrude. On May 19, 1966, the jury found Gertrude guilty of first-degree murder and a recommended sentence of life in prison. Paula was guilty of second-degree murder, and Coy Hubbard, Richard Hobbs, and John Jr. were found guilty of manslaughter. Paula was released from prison in 1971, despite attempting to escape twice. She is now married with 2 children, and she lives in Iowa.
It was a shock for a small Iowa town.
A convicted killer hiding her identity was teaching in their high school. Tonight, Todd Mega reports she is out of a job.
Kevin and Stacy, it happened in the town of Conrad, just north of Marshalltown in Grundy County. And tonight, a 47-year-old crime is the talk of the town.
Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Jr. each served less than 2 years. Richard died in 1972 due to lung cancer. Coy Hubbard continued with a life of crime, and in 2007, when a film about Sylvia's death called An American Crime was released, Coy was fired from his job. John Jr. became a minister and died of diabetes complications in 2005. The rest of the Baniszewski children were placed in foster care. While Gertrude was incarcerated, she became a model prisoner, but she never fully took responsibility for Sylvia's death. She often blamed it on her asthma medication, and she was released from prison in 1985, but she died in 1990 due to lung cancer. Betty and Lester passed away in 1998 and 2013, respectively. Jenny emphasized to the media that her parents were in no way to blame for Sylvia's death. Jenny grew up and got married and had 2 children of her own. She was dependent upon anxiety medication for her entire life due to the trauma of the abuse she watched her sister endure. Jenny passed away in 2004 due to a heart attack. Sylvia Likens' death was credited to be the creation of the mandated reporter law, meaning that if a person, a citizen, sees a child being neglected or going through any type of abuse, you are obligated by law to let authorities know. What did you all think of this case? I found it really sad and heartbreaking, especially because Gertrude would never take responsibility for what she did to Sylvia and the part she played, which was basically creating this situation. This would have never happened if she wasn't the first one to start abusing her. If you care to read more details about this case, I do recommend the book The House of Evil by John Dean. I read that in preparation of this video. There's also a film called An American Crime, which starred Elliot Page. It came out in about 2007, but it was pretty good, and it wasn't extremely graphic, so I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie, and it did tell the story pretty well, so that would also be an interesting thing to try out if you are interested in this case. Thank you for watching. For those of you who made it this far, I really appreciate it. If there are any specific cases you would like me to cover in the future, please let me know, and otherwise, I hope you guys stay safe out there. Bye-bye.